Welcome back, focused learners, to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the absolute masterpiece that is Randall Rucker's 2025 dark fantasy shared universe. We're talking, of course, about Starfaller, Shadowborn, and the Chronicles of Kane. If you've been following Rucker's work, you know he absolutely does not pull his punches. These two books are completely uncompromising. They are genuinely brilliant and unapologetically dark. But what makes them truly remarkable, what we're going to dig into today, is how they explore two entirely different kinds of darkness within the exact same world. Just picture this for a second. You've got a man standing in a completely wrecked tavern, and his absolute best friend is dissolving into black void chains right in front of him. And the man? He's laughing. Just pure, dark bliss. That's the gut punch ending of Starfaller. Now, contrast that with another scene. A different man literally clawing his way out of a shallow grave, dirt in his teeth, silver spikes still buried in his chest. He feasts on the corpses of the very people who hunted him just to heal, gets on his horse, and accepts his eternal curse as his crown. That is the ending of Kane. So the big question is, how on earth do these two completely different, devastating moments of horror exist in the exact same shared universe? Section 1. The Canvas. The City of Archist. Because before we even get to these protagonists, we really have to establish the dark world they're operating in. Archist is this massive, noir fantasy trading hub built right on top of a nexus of ley lines. Think of it like a dark fantasy Gotham, where power changes hands in whispers. To really grasp the brilliance of Rucker's world building, we have to look at this living city from two totally opposite vantage points. On one hand, Starfaller experiences Archist from the absolute top of the food chain. As the Red Hand, he's a supreme military commander managing entire armies and cosmic threats way beneath the streets. But then you have Kane, who sees the exact same city from the gritty, absolute bottom. He's navigating sewers and storm trenches, literally categorizing the city by where he can scrounge up medicine or find a safe tavern. It's the exact same city, but a totally different hunting ground. And what's really fascinating here is how tightly interconnected this universe actually is. Rucker brilliantly rewards readers of both books with these amazing overlaps. We get shared characters like the Dwarven Lord Titan Starax and those lethal Dark Elf warriors. But okay, the absolute mind-blowing moment has to be the Stone Garden safe house scene. Starfaller actually shows up in Kane's book during this incredibly tense negotiation. In his own novel, Starfaller is the central commander, the guy we're rooting for. But through Kane's eyes, he's just another extremely dangerous faction leader that you need to watch your back around. It's just a masterful piece of shared universe craft that makes the whole world feel twice as big. Part 2. The protagonists, victim versus architect. Let's shift gears and examine how the core differences between our anti-heroes are fundamentally about agency and, well, betrayal. Both of these novels are utterly obsessed with betrayal, but the direction of that betrayal is completely reversed. Take Starfaller, the betrayed. Everything that made him who he is was done to him. The Red Ghosts literally stole his true identity as a child just to forge him into a weapon. They even went so far as to murder Isana, the woman he loved, just to bind him to their organization through sheer grief. He is a tragic victim of his oppressors. Now contrast that with Kane, the betrayer. Kane is no victim. 1,000 years ago, he opened his doors to mage hunters and watched them burn his own witch lover at the stake, all just to secure his own power. Kane is the sole architect of his own 1,000-year damnation. So, the crucial point here is how this reverse direction of betrayal completely flips your emotional experience as a reader. With Starfaller, the anger points outward. He's actively fighting external systems, desperately trying to reclaim his agency from the villains who ruined his life. It gives us this really satisfying tragedy with a clear enemy to root against. But Kane's anger, that points entirely inward. He doesn't have a big bad villain to blame because, well, he is the villain of his own origin story. He's haunted by his own foundational sin. And it begs the question, what does a man do when he is his own oppressor? Section 3. The Mechanics of Corruption. And this brilliantly sets up our next structural comparison, showing exactly how their supernatural conditions serve as direct metaphors for their grief. Okay, so both characters suffer from this intense supernatural corruption, but the mechanics operate as total mirror images of each other. Starfaller has the Eye of Shadows embedded right in his chest. It's a void parasite, an external, completely alien force imposed upon him that literally hollows him out, creating this almost elegant need to magically drain life force. It is not his fault. Kane, on the other hand, bears the curse. This is completely internal. It is a direct consequence of his own terrible choice a millennium ago. And because he actually earned it, his hunger isn't some elegant magic. No, it requires a visceral, biological, absolutely grotesque consumption of human flesh and Greythorn's soil. It is the literal, inescapable bill for his own sins. Section 4. Cinematic versus claustrophobic prose. What's really interesting about this next part is that the medium itself is the message here. Rucker completely shifts his writing style to perfectly match the psychology of each protagonist. Just listen to the sheer scale of this description from Starfaller. The city's jagged skyline clawed at the heavens, its architecture a chaotic mixture of crumbling relics and towering spires. This perfectly showcases that wide cinematic prose I'm talking about. It really emphasizes the grand cosmic scale of the world. When Starfaller fights, the violence is practiced, precise, and clinically efficient, matching the sweeping ambition of his whole storyline. But then you open up Kane's book, and the prose violently shifts. Smell of grave soil, cold as hammered bone, mud sucking at boots. It's tight. It's heavily fragmented. It's this incredibly claustrophobic Gothic prose that essentially traps you, the reader, in highly uncomfortable bodily sensory details. It honestly feels like being locked in a tiny room with someone who smells of rot and just refuses to leave. The reason all of this matters is that it is an absolute masterclass in how different prose styles completely alter our emotional experience of the exact same dark beats. Starfaller gives us straight-up cosmic horror, ancient sleeping gods and massive void entities. Kane gives us corporal horror. The horror isn't some distant god, the horror is your own face literally rotting off, or the grotesque reality of having to eat a man just to survive. It's the exact same world, written in two entirely different emotional keys. Part 5. Who is the real monster? Let's bring this to a climax with the central thematic question that both of these novels are so deeply obsessed with. These are, without a doubt, the most devastating scenes from the books, and they prove that absolutely neither character gets a clean redemption arc. At the Horned Goat Inn, Starfaller finally accepts a total merger with the Void just to save his best friend Rake. But the Void just consumes. Rake dies anyway. And the true, gut-wrenching tragedy is that Starfaller is laughing. He has completely lost his capacity to care that he just lost his best friend. Meanwhile, over in the ruins of Greythorn, Kane finally begs the voice of his dead witch lover for release. He doesn't even ask for forgiveness anymore, he just wants an end to the haunting. And he receives nothing but silence. In that moment, he realizes he will never, ever be forgiven. And this brings us to a devastating dilemma, drawn straight from the core of Rucker's universe. In these books, the heroes aren't clean, and the villains are really just doing their own version of clean. Rucker forces us to evaluate morality when there is no clear before and after. There is only what you do with what you are. Which brings us to our final, powerful takeaway for this explainer. Starfaller is the ultimate tragedy of losing yourself to a monster you didn't choose. Kane is the tragedy of living with a monster you deliberately chose to become. It is this brilliant duality that makes these books so incredibly unforgettable. If you really want to experience the true scale of this world, you absolutely have to read both to see the complete picture. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on in the dark. Between the man who lost his humanity and the man who sold his, who is the real monster?